Yep.
Well, it's good that you could join us, and it's good that everybody could join us. We're going to get started anytime now, Sarah. So you lead the
Yes,
effort.
yes. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. We're gonna have a super fun session today. I am very excited because I have two of what I consider mentors and colleagues, Dr. Knaust and Dr. Robertson, who will be our guest speakers today. And this is a topic, I know there's people like, I know you. So we're gonna have a fun session that we hope is always helpful to your professional and personal development. And our topic, can everybody see my screen? Inclusive teaching goals and strategies in higher education. So right before we start, as you know, you can put your questions and comments in the chat, and either Agni, Dr. Flores, or myself will be replying to those. I'm glad to see participants coming in, and this session, as the previous ones, is being recorded, except the breakout sessions. So we post these for later in your Blackboard section. A quick announcement, thank you for turning in your deliverables. I know that some of you have had some delays because of mentor communication and other technology issues that we are experiencing, but we work with you, we are flexible, and we know that this is the way we're working now, and this is the biggest group we've ever had for Aspire, and it is also the first time that we do our cohort completely online. So you are learning and we are as well. So thank you for your patience. You know that as soon as I get an email, I'll respond, and Agni does too. So we are all in touch and communicating. So let's begin. Inclusive teaching goals and strategies in higher education. So I want to welcome with a lot of excitement today's guest speakers, Dr. Helmut Knaust and Dr. William Robertson. Dr. Knaust will be talking to us about inclusive teaching goals, followed by inclusive teaching strategies with Dr. Robertson. So I will give a brief introduction to each one of our speakers. And this is exciting for me particularly and some of my colleagues because we also work together in other initiatives that are aimed for, you know, raising the bar and giving an opportunity to underrepresented minorities. And I've had the great pleasure of working with Dr. Knaust since probably around 2005, I think. We've traveled to Chile and to Spain, and we've done a lot of exciting things together with the LSAM program and adventures and stories. And Dr. Robertson has also been part of our team, and you're gonna be surprised to see a few pictures of what he does on the side without his nice suit and academic look. So for those of you who don't know, he's also called Dr. Skateboard. So you can imagine. We're gonna have a lot of fun today, guys. So let's get started. So I would like to pass the microphone to Dr. Knaust, who's an associate professor in math and also a UTEP distinguished teaching professor. He's part of the College of Science and is also a co-principal investigator for the LSAM program and for the Bridge to the Doctorate program, among many, many others, programs, academic appointments, and other great initiatives that he will talk to you about in just 1 second. Dr. Knaust, all yours.
All right, I'm ready. I want to start out by saying that I'm honored to share some thoughts of mine with you. I wish that I had a support group like the one you seem to be having when I started out. You will see from my talk that I didn't. So I had to figure it all out by myself. Dr. Flores said I should talk about my own journey, so that's what I will do. Maybe I missed the topic, inclusive teaching goals in higher education. I just want to tell you where I came from and where I've been trying to go to. Can you please go to the next slide, or can I do this myself? Yeah, we don't need that one. So this, the previous slide is the slide, you know, I'm thinking about I want my students to learn, and I need certain things for that to happen. The previous slide, you know, where it lists all the stuff I did in the 30 years I've been teaching, just creates distance between me and the listeners. Yeah, because it looks like I did a lot of stuff and they can compare. Like I said, I started out very naive. I'm a math professor, and you know, no one told me what to do. So, you know, I thought, oh, you've heard this before. My professors are smart. My professors lecture. So smart people lecture. So I am smart. I will lecture. And if you think about your math classes, it's probably right on, right? Most math classes are probably 15 weeks of lecture, 3 tests, and the final exam. Yeah, were yours like that? I think so. Many of them were like that. That's how I started out. I am a very shy person. I can always say that when Dr. Flores is in the room, everyone is a shy person with Dr. Flores around. Yeah? So I was a very shy person. Lecturing for me was very safe. You know, I would prepare at home. So I knew what I was going to say. I would step into the classroom. I created distance to my students by being the only one having a piece of chalk in my hand. And then I started talking. Every 10 minutes, I would interrupt and say, any questions? But just for 5 seconds, and then I would continue. There were no questions. So this is how I started out, and it took me a while to get better at that, because when you start lecturing at the beginning, you're also not good at that. Yeah, so it takes you a while to learn from your mistakes and become better. I think the one thing which was in my favor is that right from the beginning, I was always interested in what do my students learn. I think if you want to become a teacher, if you are not interested in your students learning, then you should try to find a different job. So I can say that about myself. I was always interested in finding out what my students were learning, and this was quite disappointing. You know, I would look at their test results. Lots of students did not do so well, but it was really more than that. They would come to my office hours. Office hours, very important, because this is really the premier place where you can find out about your students. And in the beginning, when you look like them, I do not look like them anymore, so I don't have many visitors in my office hours. But you, in the beginning, you look like them, they will come to your office hours. Yeah, and so you can go to them and you can ask questions, find out about them. So there were more disconcerting things I observed when they were coming to my office hours, namely that it was quite common that there was not a good relation between how they were doing on the exams and how they were reacting in my office hours. There were kids, they seemed to be smart enough, but they were doing lousy on the tests. There were A students who didn't know anything. They came to my office and they seemed to not understand anything. So there was also not a good correlation between what the students learned and what I experienced happening in my office hours. I looked over their notes. You should do that too. Can they take good notes? How does that affect how they can learn at home? If they don't take good notes, if that is your model, those kinds of things. I asked them about the background. Do you work? How many hours do you work? You know, how many kids do you have, and so forth, trying to get an idea of who I was dealing with. So I did this for a while, and you know, then I realized that I was not really interested in continuing like that for the rest of my life, and I was really disappointed that couldn't get more across to the students. Funny anecdote. Now that we're teaching online, some of my colleagues completely panicked because, you know, if you think about doing this model online, the lecturing part is perfect. They just sit in front of their computer and talk. It's even safer. They can hit the pause button if they have to think a little bit. But what makes them panic is the tests. They now cannot control anymore whether students, you know, how they cheat, or what materials they use, and they panic about that. Yeah, so how can I teach online if I can't control the environment during a test? You know, I would say, well, you know, come up with different ways to do this. Don't give them tests, give them something else. They can't. So I did this for 3 or 4 years, and there was actually a colleague of mine, he felt very similar, and we started talking. And so I started to try out some thoughts And I started to think about my own development, and I tried out some things on him, and that really got us started. Can you go to the next slide? So I started to think about how my learning experience was in mathematics. And it was not all lecturing. I list 3 modes of my learning experience in the order, I think, of effectiveness as I perceive it. Also maybe fun. I learned mathematics with others. I will talk about that a little bit more. I learned math on my own, and I learned mathematics from others. That's the lecturing part. Yeah, that other people were trying to explain things to me. But let me get started with learning mathematics with others. I had been very fortunate when I was a freshman. You know, I went to a commuter school in Germany, in case you haven't noticed my accent yet. I went to a commuter school in Germany, and up to this day, I don't really remember how this happened, but within a week of classes, I was a member in a team of 5 students learning mathematics. And this turned out to be a high-functioning team. If I reflect upon this, I would say maybe this was because one of the guys was ex-military, so he knew how to form teams, and I think he helped us along. We were high-functioning. We met maybe for 20 hours a week at the university, commuter school, where people would drive to work, work to the university, and would meet with the team and would discuss homework problems and other things. So maybe one reason that I ended up where I am is because of that experience. It was not frustrating for me, it was fun. We struggled, but it was fun. And I think it was quite effective. Even, you know, we had one team member who was probably not as strong as the other ones, but we found a role for him to play as well. So he would explain, in the end, you know, he would explain things to us to make sure he would understand, and we could check our own understanding again. This was lots of fun. And throughout my career, I've always had these experiences. My PhD advisor was like that. This is how you write a PhD thesis in mathematics. You talk to your advisor, and I would talk to him. We would meet every afternoon and would talk about research. I also had that experience when I was a professor, learning some new mathematics with some colleagues from different universities at summer schools. Has always been lots of fun. I think it has always been very efficient. If I compare learning math on my own, learning math from others, I still would say that I like learning mathematics on my own better than to go to lectures. The one reason probably is that I could choose my own pace. So I was not, you know, often lectures were too slow or too fast for me. So I would get lost, I would be bored. If I do stuff on my own, I can choose my own pace. Brilliant lecturers, I don't know. There are also brilliant textbooks. Yeah, so that's not really an obstacle. I teach one class for future high school teachers in mathematics every 2 years. And one of the questions I start out with is, who was your favorite teacher? And maybe we can do this in the breakout afterwards. They never talk about them being brilliant lecturers. That doesn't seem to make much of a difference. So this is where I'm coming from, and I would think that the math I've learned probably in equal parts between those 3. With others, on my own, from others. So once I understood that, I started thinking about how can I bring that experience to my students. Next slide, please. You know, we should do a reality check here because you already heard me always using the he. Who did I learn math from and or with? Mostly white males. Because, you know, I was in Germany. There were not many female math students, so it was a strange environment. I also should let you know about my background. Like most of the students I started out with, I come from a middle class upbringing. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. But I did not have to work while I was attending a university. My parents had enough money to support me. Universities did not charge tuition in Germany, still don't. So I really could concentrate on learning. This is very different from the students I have. I was vigorously intellectual curious. This is sometimes something I struggle sometimes with my students, that I miss that, and I try to light the spark to make that happen in them. And I wanted to climb the social ladder. I think this is something I have in common with my students. Many of them are the first ones in their family to attend college or graduate from college. They want to get a better job in the math department. That means they want to become math teachers. Yeah, you get a reliable salary every month. You can call yourself a member of a solid middle class, those kinds of things. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. In Dr. Flores in engineering, the same thing. Those are the standard, the traditional ways to climb the social ladder, to become an engineer, to become a teacher, to become a nurse. Yeah, those are something I share with my students. Next slide, please. I've tried many things in my life in teaching. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work, and I've never been shy on learning from the things that didn't work and get rid of them and try to improve. One thing I've been involved in also with Dr. Flores has been peer-led team learning. This is about trying to create a cross between learning from and learning with others. Peer leaders are undergraduate students who teach other undergraduate students. We use that in pre-calculus in mathematics. We also used it in introductory classes in physics and chemistry. We got a grant from the NSF to do this. First instincts in teaching are often wrong. So if I ask you, what kind of undergraduate students would you hire to teach other undergraduate students? You would probably, like me, say, well, I try to find good students. I'm not recommending to hire bad students, but I found out very quickly that a brilliant undergraduate student does not make for a brilliant peer leader necessarily. Of course, there are exceptions. We had one peer leader who actually got a master's degree with us. He was a very talented student, but he just wanted to become a teacher. He wanted to go in there to the peer leading session with the students, and he wanted to be the only one who had the piece of chalk in their hand and talk. Yeah, well, then you might as well let this be done by a math professor. So the good peer leaders we found were ones who were able and willing to let the students do this stuff. So they usually the peer leaders themselves came up with some problems for the students to solve during the sessions. And groups of 3, they each would get a piece of chalk and they would stand on the blackboard and they would try to talk it out. Learning mathematics by standing up at the blackboard. Yeah, that's learning with others more than anything else. In case you're curious why we're not doing this anymore, the reason is that this is quite expensive. Even though peer leaders are cheap, you need many of them to staff all the sections, right? In mathematics, I think we had between 15 and 18 sections of pre-calculus every semester. We broke that into two sub-sessions for peer leaders. So we needed close to 50 peer leaders per semester. So the numbers add up. Another idea I've been using, I think nearly every semester, is I try to let students work in teams. The mistakes I made in the beginning was, they said, well, now you guys work in teams. I don't think it works like that. I mean, this is also a learning process for students to participate in teams in a meaningful way, and you have to invest some time, and they have to invest some time to make this work. That's why I think that longer-term teams are more productive than just having one for each class section, so that the students have a chance to learn from their own mistakes and from their own accomplishments how to work in a group. Careful selection of teams. like I said, I'm shy and I'm trying not to be too invasive. So when I started out with teams, I let the students select the teams. I can tell you which semester I stopped doing that. I had 25 students. And at the end of, I had already warned them at the end of the class. I said, well, you should work for the final project in teams of 3. Why don't you write down, once you have your team ready, write down the names on a piece of paper, and then you can turn it in while you leave, and you're done for the day. So, within 2 or 3 minutes, I had 8 pieces of paper with 24 names, and there was 1 student left. That 1 student was African-American female. Yeah, this is how this works if you let the students use. That those students who are considered to not be so mainstream, they are left to their own devices. If you let students choose teams in class, you should watch. Maybe you can predict when you say, let's get into teams, let's go into pairs, and you look at the students in the audience, which seem to be not the mainstream, older than average or something like that. Look how they arrange. It's very predictable how this happens. So I don't do this anymore. I don't let the students select because I don't want it. I select the teams myself. This is really a bummer during the pandemic because I don't have much information. I put the kids into teams and I just look at what their major is and not much else because I don't see them. I don't know how they react and so forth. Yeah, so this is a big disadvantage for me last 2 semesters that I can't choose the teams, even though I've been teaching courses where I heavily rely on teams. Last slide. I also worked on the piece of learning on your own, how one can try to organize that. This is probably different if I do inquiry-based learning, that is different from the other concepts, and that is really a whole course design. If I teach a course inquiry-based learning style, then the whole course will be like that. There are not parts where I do something different. I list the web address at the bottom so you can check out how this works in mathematics. This is really quite radical. I do not give lectures. I maybe talk 15 minutes every week, if you call it lectures. So students really are on their own. I provide them with minimalist instructional material with lots of questions. Most of them are open-ended questions. Investigate this, investigate that. I let the students figure it out themselves. I usually, well, it depends. So this semester I have 1 undergraduate course for sophomores where I do this. I made, for the whole semester, I made 6 10-minute videos. That's all the instruction I provide. The rest is instructional material. At the undergraduate level, I would do this in teams. So I have teams of 3 students and they work together. They can meet on Blackboard, collaborate, and talk about the stuff. They can email stuff back and forth, share Google documents, but they have to figure it out themselves. If you do stuff like that, there has to be a way that they report out. If I do this in person, they can report maybe out in class. If not, like this semester, they have to write it up. Yeah. I also teach 1 class this semester, a graduate class, where I let students figure things out individually. I also don't teach, but then the reporting out happens that they step up to the board and show what they have. Yeah, so we can discuss it in class. This semester I used a bulletin board to do that, which works out okay. Well, I showed you a little bit about the journey I took. I think, I've done this for 30 years. I need another 30 years to try out all the things I would still be interested in trying out, but I probably won't. So, Bill, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Knaust. We were talking about setting up this, and before I even intervened, Dr. Knaust and Dr. Robertson figured out the smooth transition between the goals and the strategies. So that's what I get for having good colleagues. So saying that, we will now listen to Dr. William Robertson, who is professor of STEM education in the teacher education department at our university. And he will talk about the strategies on how to do inclusive teaching and how to be a more inclusive instructor. So Dr. Robertson.
Great, thank you, Sara, and thanks everyone for having me here today. Thank you, Dr. Knaust, for your presentation and for, I think, like you said, we worked on these separately and somehow they aligned, and that's, I think, a sign of good colleagues who worked well together over many years as well. I also have to say a specific hi to Christian Servin, who I see in the audience, who's a friend and a colleague from back in the GK12 days, and consider him like I said, a friend and a colleague throughout. So it's good to see you, Christian, and to be here too. That's a great surprise. So great to reconnect with you as well. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about inclusive teaching strategies, and I think the three words, even though strategies are underlined, the first one is inclusive. So we want to talk about things that relate to all learners and the way learners learn, and that's going to be a big part of it. And then teaching is a unique dynamic, and I think you learned from Dr. Knaust that there's two basic types of teaching. There's the teaching that's teacher-centric, and there's the teaching that's student-centric. And so I'm going to focus more on the latter, so more of a teacher-facilitated, student-centered design. And then the strategies, as a teacher educator by trade, part of this is actually using stuff that is practical or pragmatic and things you can use. And so I want to share with you a few tools for your toolkit that might be helpful as well. And if we were all together, we'd probably be doing these and modeling those, but at least I can share them with you today. So we'll go to the next slide, Sara. So as Sara said, my background, I won't spend too long here, but I've, been at UTEP since 2004. I've had, roles as a faculty member and as an administrator. My background is in STEM education and doing things in English and Spanish. And, I've had some interesting experiences along the way, and as well as being a high school and a middle school teacher. And then you see the other part of that is sort of the doctor skateboard part. And this is something I've been doing, I did professionally, and I've done it since I was in middle school, and I continue to do it today. In fact, I'm going tomorrow to go ride my skateboard in town because it's going to be a nice day. So it's just something I do, but interestingly enough, it has allowed me to integrate things about skateboarding into the work I do, specifically in the areas of physical science and mathematics, and because there's a lot of physics and math in the way skateboards and other action sports do work and move. The other thing I've developed is a lot of instructional videos, and now most recently a series of graphic novels in English and Spanish. And primarily I'm focused on middle grades, students, and teacher development, but most of my materials do extend from upper elementary into K-12. The last part of this is Dr. Skateboard was always something that I looked at as sort of a paradox in many ways, and that there were two terms that didn't really need to be linked together or shouldn't be linked together, like jumbo shrimp or something like that. But the idea was that, to use your passions to be successful, not only in the things you're passionate about, like for me with skateboarding at an early age, but also in your education. And maybe it's okay to be a little different in that approach. And so to the young people, I was always trying to, who were into skating or other things, to get them to focus on the doctor part and maybe add some focus in their education. And then to adults who see the doctor part and find, that title as something that they can respect, the other part is to take that same kind of respect to people who are doing activities that you may not understand, like skateboarding, and don't marginalize people just because of the activities they're doing. lastly, I'd just say in terms of the nature of education, both in my work as a professor and as a longtime skateboarder, you know, it's inherently diverse. And there's, you know, these are two things, education and, if you will, skateboarding, that are done by everyone all over the world in so many ways, and that they integrate community as well. And so those are two tenets, I think, that I want to bring forward with us as we think about this. Next slide, Sara. So first off, you know, these are just some questions that, you know, and we may bring those up again in the breakout rooms, but these are some questions I always start off when I'm trying to get this idea of inclusiveness or equity in the classroom, for people to start thinking about, you know, how do you ensure that you're dealing with all of your students in the same way? You know, we've all had probably been in classes where you can identify who maybe the teacher or the professor's favorite is, and there's a certain kind of imbalance that's caused by that. And as an instructor, the challenge is very great, because you have to be able to put that aside and also find your way to everyone in the class. And that includes how they learn, what they're interested in, and what kinds of things you might approach in terms of trying to make things relatable in your class. The second part, you know, students have experiences, and they come to learning situations with those experiences. And to deny that, to think that students are blank slates or empty vessels to be filled with your knowledge is a mistake, and it's not true either. In many ways, students are thinking about the things you're going to present, whether they have had a chance to deal with it or not. They might have had some experience that could link through that. Plus, where they're from, their sociocultural background, their what they do, their entire life impacts how they learn. And so where someone is, you know, grows up and the experiences they have, they use that as a lens to filter their experiences through. And so you have to recognize that first off in your classes. And I think a big way to overcome that, or to use that, is to get to know your students and to find ways to understand their interests and the things they like to do, but also to get to know them as individuals and people. Dr. Knaust mentioned office hours. One of the things I do in classes a lot of times is I get to class early, and I meet people as they come in, and it's a great way to interact quickly. And you find out, if you linger just a little, you show up a little early and you stay a little late, you find out a lot about students. And I think if you pay attention in class, you can find a lot in common with your students and learn a lot about them as well. The third part is, you know, how do we recognize the ways the students view the world, the classroom, our subject areas? For me, this is a strategy, is, you know, is built on questioning. And you ask questions, you find a lot out. But the one thing about asking questions is that they, in a sense, turn their responsibility for learning around. When you lead with questions, you place the responsibility for learning on the learner. And in many ways, it's an open invitation for students to be involved. So that is very inclusive when you use questions. And so that's how you can figure out how students view these things and much more, is to constantly lead with questions. And then finally, how do we overcome our own assumptions of students? This is something that I think is quite challenging for all of us, is how do you really, you know, figure out what you're thinking about students, and you're being honest about it as well. From my own experience, these biases are subtle, and you need to be aware of them in order to deal with them. One of the best advice, a piece of advice I got as a middle school teacher was, don't take things personally. And it's hard to not take things personally when they're directed at you personally, and but you learn to if you will, be the leader in that part of the classroom, and then to be open to people as well. One of the things I always found is the students in the classroom who would kind of set me off from the start. Like I'd look in the class and I'd go, oh no, there they are. You know, that's going to be a problem. As I self-reflected on that over the years, I started to realize that the students I was identifying as potential problems in my classroom were the ones that most reminded me of myself. And that was a very honest thing to come to, is because I think I felt that I was challenged in the class just by their presence and their personalities, that they were very similar. When I kind of learned that and I overcame it, I actually found allies in the classroom rather than conflicts. And so that's just something to think about as we move forward. Next slide, Sara. So one of the things that you can do to ensure that you're going to reach a majority of your students is to vary the way you present your materials, or the way you have your materials available to students. And these are not all of the things you can do, but research has shown if you have visual pieces, auditory pieces, and kinesthetic pieces in your approach to teaching, you'll reach 85% of your learners' best way of learning. Now, you may, as a teacher, have a strength in one of these areas, and you may be prone to using that area primarily throughout your teaching. Dr. Knaust talked about, you know, learning from others and the way you are enculturated into the ideas of lecturing. But the other part is you have to remember not to just sit in one modality. If you're a visual person, not to do everything visual, because not everyone learns best that way. And auditory learners, you know, people do listen. And today, you know, with videos and other things we can prepare, we find out also not just they look at it, they listen to it, and they listen to it over and over and over. That's one of the things I've learned from my work in education in terms of video and consumable content. And then finally, you know, another basic premise is you learn by doing. And this is one way you get people to be engaged. And even during the pandemic, you know, one of the ways is to get people to demonstrate that they understand. And so that's another way to do that. And I've actually used, you know, assignments where people have to create their own videos and show what they're, you know, kind of what they've learned and how they would approach a specific issue, problem, or strategy in a classroom. And that's been very helpful. I've been using a tool called UJA, which we have at UTEP, but it's also, you could do things like using YouTube and having people create products that they can demonstrate. Next slide. So some inclusive practices, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but you know, let me just, this sort of informs you of where I come from. The ideas of constructivism with the 5 E's of engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. This is a teaching and learning strategy that I think is a way of organizing not only your classroom, but even your courses. And if you look to have a way of hooking students into problems or issues, you give them open-ended ways to explore things. Maybe that's through websites. The explain is where you deliver content, then you deepen and broaden it, and finally you evaluate them. The big difference between a constructivist teacher or constructivist approach and a traditional teaching approach is, in a constructivist approach, you give people an experience first, and then you deliver content. And in a traditional approach, you deliver content, and then you ask them to do something with it, or you give them an experience. So I think constructivism is a fundamental tenet for me, and I think it models the way most people learn. In terms of inquiry-based learning, Dr. Knaust talked about this and brought this up, but I just wanted to bring up the ideas of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and creativity, which is the top of Bloom's taxonomy. And this is also known as critical thinking. And this is something people talk about all the time. How do you activate critical thinking in a classroom you put people in tasks or ask them to do things where they have to take something and try to make sense of it. And so those kinds of skills come through, and those are higher order thinking skills or critical thinking skills. Socratic questioning, this is an approach where you question the answer, not answer the question. This is one I try to use a lot with pre-service teachers, because often a student will ask a question like, how would you solve this problem, or what simple machines are actually being used in this diagram? And the tendency is to answer the question, well, this is the wedge and the pulley are being used here. But the other part is to turn it around and just say, well, what do you think is being used? Which looks like a simple machine? What's the difference between a simple machine and a compound machine? And it's something you have to work at. And usually you use those as guiding questions throughout. So it's a matter of, I think, asking more questions, and Socratic questioning is a methodology for doing that. Brainstorming and mind mapping, I think, are great beginnings, great ways if you're stuck to try to get people to move forward. And a couple of tenets are always that all ideas matter and that everyone contributes. The active learning strategies, Dr. Knaust talked about the importance of groups, and lo and behold, we both are firm believers in peer-led team learning. But the main thing is that you get people taking responsibility for their learning, but that they lean on others. Dr. Knaust mentioned the 3 ways of learning. There's also, it's important because in designing a course or working in it, there are going to be 3 different dynamics that a student is going to do. Student's going to interact with other students, student's going to interact with the content, and students should interact with the teacher. But in that, always the student is at the center of the learning. So that's an important part to keep in mind. And then finally, liberating structures. This is something I've used over the years that I think is quite effective. They're very inclusive and very active. And Sara, could you go to the next one? So liberating structures, and there's the website there. I would encourage you to go to liberatingstructures.com. On there are a list of probably 33 different strategies you can use with groups. And a couple that are here, impromptu networking. These are all done face-to-face, but we have used them in virtual because you can do breakout rooms and different things with that, like we're going to experience in just a little while. But impromptu networking is finding a partner and discussing, and it's sort of like speed dating if you've ever experienced that. But it's a good, quick way to do icebreakers and to get people moving. The 1, 2, 4 all group discussion strategy I use a lot. 1, an individual thinks about a prompt. 2, they go to a pair. 4, they combine with another pair, and then you open it up to the group. And you can manage that one in about 10 minutes, and it's a very good way to introduce new content. The appreciative interview is where you take turns talking about a specific topic, and you give your knowledge on that topic. And what's nice about this is you get a chance to rehearse your understandings of content before you have to share them with the class. And then finally, Troika consulting is the use of a triad or a triangle relationship where one person provides their ideas on a topic and they get feedback from 2 people, and that moves around the room. I've used Troika consulting a lot more with graduate students who are trying to work out either ideas for papers or for dissertation topics and the like. Next slide, please. Okay, so that finishes mine, bringing it out, and I'll turn it back over to Sara.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Robertson. Yes, we're going to do our session breakout. We're doing great on time. I am the time police, as you all know. So for the session breakout, we've done this before, so you all know how it works. You will be paired with either Aspire team member or one of our mentors who is present in the session. And you will have an opportunity to discuss the information provided. We have allocated 10 minutes, which is a tiny bit more than last time because we ran out of time last time. There is so much information and we want to give you as much interaction time as possible too. So how can you become a more inclusive instructor now that you have been exposed to this information that perhaps you had experienced as a student, but now that you're making that transition into a mental state of being the one who facilitates the learning, we want to know what your thoughts and your questions are. So for this part of the dynamic, I am going to ask you to turn on your cameras and unmute your microphones. I'll send you to the rooms and I will see you in 10 minutes. And as always, I'll send you a quick notice when we're about to cut, halfway and 1 minute before, so you can wrap it. If anybody drops, don't worry, join in and I'll send you to your breakout room again. I know somebody just dropped right now. So I will see you in 10 minutes. Have fun.
Not enough time. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, too short.
It's always too short. And, and we programmed it for 10 minutes, but Zoom did its own thing. So you had 2 more minutes, but sorry. Okay. I'm very glad to see everyone's faces. And like I always say, I'm jealous that you get to have that time, but somebody has to be working the system. So I am happy that you have some time to do this interaction, see each other, talk a little bit more and explore some of these ideas. And that was our breakout session for today. So for some concluding remarks and additional resources, I've included a few links in this presentation. I know we don't have time to go over each one, but both of our guest speakers have their external web pages. And you know that we put these as PDFs in the Blackboard shell. So you will be able to download this PDF document and with more time and on your own, you can explore these links and save them. And also some of these, maybe you're already familiar because we've shared a few articles for your exercises, and they have Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, Teaching Innovation, Inclusive Teaching, and other institutions who have similar initiatives and are doing things such as our efforts to make sure that we are becoming more aware, well-rounded, and better educators with better ways of giving access to everyone. So Dr. Flores, you have a few concluding remarks, and then Agni has some announcements and housekeeping before we close today's session.
Absolutely. I would like to say, first of all, thank you to both our speakers for taking the time to meet with us, Dr. Knaust and Dr. Robertson. Both are incredibly busy people, as are our colleagues from the El Paso Community College and UT Permian Basin, who are present as well. I really like the contrast between the two speakers. Dr. Knaust talked about his personal experience as a journey to become a better educator. You know, you always start with certain assumptions, and then you start challenging your assumptions so that you can do a better job at whatever it is that you do. But in Dr. Knaust's case, this journey took him to a much better understanding of how to be a better educator in mathematics, which in society holds a special status, as you all know, in the STEM disciplines. And so figuring out how to engage students is a major challenge. And understanding your own personal biases that you may bring to the table is also crucial, because you may have to change or challenge those biases so that you can be much more inclusive. And I like the idea, think about inclusiveness like not leaving anybody behind, like Ohana family, right? In Hawaiian, it's you don't leave people behind. If you know somebody in the classroom struggling, don't leave that person behind. Encourage the peers to help this particular individual, and also encourage this particular individual to talk to you about what the challenges are. They always have something to say, so it's really important to listen. Dr. Robertson, on the other hand, he speaks like an expert in higher education, and he has a wealth of knowledge. All of that is highly academic. He discussed the many ways that you can practice teaching. There's many strategies he discussed some of them, but I think what's most important is that he realizes that treating everybody in an equitable manner is crucial, right? And for that, you need to understand the students. You need to understand what they bring to the table. You need to understand what you bring to the table. And you want to make sure that you know and that you adapt your teaching to the way that the students view the world. If you don't understand how they view the world, how they view higher education, then you're going to be at a loss to begin with. So it's really important to make sure that you engage students early on. I love the idea of coming in a little bit early before class, so that you can talk to the students, and then staying around for a bit longer after class has finished, so that you can also spend some additional time with the students. Sometimes students are so busy, they don't know how busy they are. And you have to challenge them, for instance, and ask them, how many hours are you studying? How many hours are you working? How many hours are you sleeping? Those things don't happen in the classroom. They happen outside the classroom. And the answers to these questions tend to help you understand the students better. So that's pretty much my advice. Make sure that you get to know students and don't leave anybody behind, as well as make sure that you challenge your own biases, because that's a way of growing as well for you personally and professionally. I know that Agni Prava has some comments, perhaps regarding resources that are available on Blackboard. So in any event, you can always reach us by email. We have our aspire@utep.edu email. And of course, you have our personal emails. And thank you, Dr. Knaust and Dr. Robertson, for sharing your emails. I'm sure that you're very busy, but we really appreciate it. And I also want to let you know that, the Aspire Alliance, and in particular, our West Texas Regional Collaborative, has a number of partners where it's not just UTEP and El Paso Community College. We have UT Permian Basin, Odessa College, and Midland College also participated in this program. And we couldn't do this work without their support. Ari? No, it's Sara, not Ari, sorry.
Same team.
Yes.
Hey, Agni has some comments for us before we adjourn.
Yes, hi everyone. So just before leaving, there's something which we had thought of in our last Aspire team meeting, which would try to help, make your Aspire fellowship experience a little more, I would say, inclusive and collaborative. So what we've planned to do that, so initially when we had this face-to-face, a lot of the Aspire fellows would try to exchange their deliverables and documents and try to peer review them before they would give it to their mentors. And I know like right now, since we're all doing it remotely, it's difficult. So we as the Aspire team, we thought that we would try to pair up the fellows, and we're going to post up the pairs and information about that on the discussion board sometime early next week. And the main idea over this would be that you'd have the opportunity to peer review and discuss your documents or anything like, preparing them. And I think it would provide a extra set of eyes, and it would allow you to exchange information and, see what you can learn from each other. So that's something we planned as the Aspire team. And sometimes early next week, as I said, you should be receiving an announcement with that. Okay, so yeah, that's
So
all.
thank you, Agni. We did this in an attempt to make an interaction a little bit more palpable due to our remote situation. And also because there are differences between the submissions. Remember, this is not an actual class or a grade or anything that will affect your GPA. So you turn it in and you get credit for it. But since we're using Blackboard, we have to actually go in and grade or comment, right? So we want to have this opportunity using the forum or the discussion board where you get a peer-to-peer review. This is obviously something optional, but we highly encourage it because you will benefit from each other's experience and also see what other fellows are doing, how they're writing their teaching statements, their plans, their observations, etc., by sharing those documents. We as a team, Dr. Montes, Dr. Flores, Agni, and myself, we can see everybody's submission in Blackboard, but you cannot see each other's. So due to that difference, we're doing this in an attempt to have a closer and more dynamic interaction. And this is something that we would normally do in person as a workshop, but this is what we have to work with, and we make the best of it. So you will get an announcement soon. And I just want to thank again our speakers and our team and everybody else, the mentors who are present and are giving us that extra time on a Friday afternoon. We're very appreciative of your time, your effort, and all of the work. And I hope that everybody has a nice weekend. There is Dr. Servin showing off. So thank you for being.
Props, Christian.
Yes, there it is. Fan base. So get it, download the presentation. You'll get an email from me a few minutes from now, thanking you for attending, and with the additional resources, a copy of this presentation with all of the links. And if you go to our speakers' web pages, which I highly encourage, you can find a purchase link, hint, hint, for Dr. Robertson's graphic novels and a lot of fun pictures. And you can check that out in our PDF of this day. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Claudia.
Thank you, Sarah.
Nice to see you again.
Bye, Milka.
Bye.